York City Hall tonight confirming that it's opening another migrant shelter.
Despite months of protests, furniture and other items are being placed at the location in Riverdale.
Another day and another shelter seemingly pops up out of nowhere. But while residents might be upset, the building, like many of the city's shelters, wasn't being used for anything and will now get people off the street. However, prominent critics are now saying the flow of asylum seekers is too much and may force people to leave town. But is that really true, or could there be another reason, any reason at all, for why folks might want to leave New York City?
For months now, residents have been conflicted by the city's plans to bring migrants into their community.
We're worried about, how it's going to affect the neighborhood.
I don't know who they are. I don't know where they're coming from.
Police are trying to tackle the rapidly escalating violent crime among Venezuelan gang members in the city who have gotten into New York.
The NYPD says Tren de Aragua has been making it over the border with the migrant influx and is getting established in New York.
For the past 10 minutes, I've been surrounded.
Reporter Olivia Reingold posted video. She was surrounded while covering the protests.
I'm staying. I want them here.
There were 3 arrests as protesters fought with the NYPD.
Multiple arrests tonight following a pro-Palestinian demonstration and march, which was supposed to happen inside Grand Central Terminal. The NYPD was ready and set up barricades, blocked off entrances, and also established checkpoints.
A lot of people have the impression that a bunch of criminals are moving in. I mean, that's really what a lot of people think. And the city has done nothing to ease their concern.
So a former governor of New York says crime connected to the asylum crisis is going to make people leave the city. But what many people upset about this are missing is that when asylum seekers do commit crime, in many cases they're just doing things New York has already decided it's not going to police and has in most cases decriminalized. Like, for example, our open-air theft markets and rampant street vending. Those things happen because New York tolerates massive amounts of shoplifting, and stolen stuff has to get resold somewhere. And it's being stolen and resold by people of all backgrounds, not just asylum seekers. And all that crime in Central Park, well, that's allowed because in this city we don't lock up people who steal things or people who assault others. Plus, in many cases, theft isn't even considered a violent crime, which is why most criminals get released even if it's not their first offense. But that being said, some of the crime, like gang activity permeating New York City's expensive shelters for asylum seekers, that's particularly alarming, especially when it's recently leaked that weapons are making their way inside what are supposed to be humanitarian facilities, transforming them from rehabilitation centers into minimum security prisons that push the innocent into lives of crime. But would that be happening if New York punished people who carry illegal weapons? Probably not. Either way, New York is trending in the wrong direction as far as public safety is concerned. And this is changing certain parts of town that used to be iconic and picturesque, but are now known for rising levels of robbery and assault. Which brings up a big question. Is the asylum crisis the real reason we've got more crime in this city? And if it is that a big enough reason to force people to leave? Or is it within the realm of possibility that New York has other problems that would force people to leave, even if the asylum crisis never happened? Well, as you're about to see, that very much depends on who you ask. So no matter who you talk to in New York, the effects of crime are visible and all around us. Inside this store right here, you got 3 security and you got 90% of the store covered in plastic, yet even still, someone was in there trying to steal things. That's ridiculous. Nonetheless, the reason you have so much theft is because if something can get stolen, it can automatically be resold somewhere, either for 50% off on the internet or out on a blanket somewhere in one of New York's many open-air flea markets where people are selling things without licenses on the side of the street, which isn't supposed to happen, yet the city allows it. And this opportunity to steal things and make money isn't lost on any of our criminals, regardless of where they're from.
For the second day in a row, the NYPD has taken down illegal street vendors along Roosevelt Avenue in Jackson Heights, Queens. Officers were seen confiscating merchandise. Some of the goods are reportedly stolen.
So that's a video of a recent raid in one of the city's open-air theft markets. And this market, it's in Queens. It reappears sometimes just hours after the police leave, and it's there pretty much year-round. Now, it's important to understand that over 200,000 people have come to New York seeking seeking asylum, and most of them did not come here to steal things from CVS or Home Depot. Yet a small minority have chosen to pursue a life of crime instead of the American dream, sometimes selling things in front of the very stores they steal from. Now, in this raid, officers confiscated a variety of merchandise, jewelry, power tools from Home Depot of all places. If you go to Home Depot now, you're going to notice that those are all locked up. But there's another issue. You don't just have people selling stuff on the street corners in Manhattan. This theft market, it's by a residential neighborhood where you have people, families, children, schools. And if you live somewhere and then within 1 year the neighborhood completely changes, and it changes in a manner that is technically against the law, that might hurt your ability to live there the same way that you used to, and that's what the former governor was talking about. But even though crime is a big issue for many people, he mentions that the asylum seekers are just doing what anyone would do in an unfamiliar environment, which of course is no excuse for criminal behavior, but he does point out that certain levels of crime tolerated by the city do have a negative effect on people's neighborhoods and their existence. And he goes on to say that once you allow certain levels of low-level crime to exist all the time, it alienates the people who live in those parts of town where this crime exists. But is he right about that? And if he is this enough of a problem that's going to actually cause people to leave the city? Or is this just another example of a former governor backseat driving?
This is the byproduct of bringing thousands of people to a city and telling them they cannot work. This is what we're seeing.
Quality of life issues are nothing new in this part of Jackson.
So Mayor Adams, who is in the proverbial driver's seat of the city itself, says that this isn't something all asylum seekers do. But crime like what we're witnessing in these news reports is something that should be expected when the city tries to house 65,000 people who can't work and just have to stay home all day. But the former governor has also remarked that this type of crime creates a climate of aggressive intimidation in middle-class neighborhoods predominantly made up of immigrants. But this raises two big questions. First, do we even have enough police to stop all of this crime that we're seeing? And two, how many people have actually left the city over the last year? Is this really happening, or is this something else?
When these raids happen, it does spook some of these vendors, so they stop selling for a day or two, but then once things cool down, they see police leave the area. Well, they come back out here and set back up. So this is a problem, because while the NYPD can come in and basically sweep the street clean and get all the vendors to leave, they just end up coming back because there is not a permanent police presence where there is a permanent outdoor theft market. And after the vendors come back, there's another temporary crackdown, and it just creates this big cycle where you've got crime and crackdowns and more crime and more crackdowns. Residents, they don't want to deal with this. They just want to live in peace. Now, to many people, the idea of moving to New York right now when they have no economic reason for doing so makes absolutely zero sense, especially when you look at how there's a massive police presence in Central Park and a massive police presence on our public transportation networks. And according to recent census data, New York City's population has indeed shrunk by almost 80,000 residents. Now, the 2024 numbers, those aren't out yet, so we can't see yet if there was a population increase or decrease over the last year. But one thing's for sure, the apartment vacancy rate here, that tells a different story, because right now it's 1.4% of all apartments in the city actually being available to rent. This is the lowest number of available apartments the city's had in the last 50 years, which means we're experiencing a housing crunch at a time when people are leaving. But the interesting thing about the recent census numbers is that according to city officials, overall population levels have been declining for the last few years. In 2022, the city lost 126,000 residents, and 278,000 residents left in 2021, which means every year for longer than the asylum crisis has been going on, this city has been losing residents, which many people say reveals that New York City has so many problems. There are reasons for people to leave that have existed for quite some time. The cost of living in a 100-year-old box apartment is skyrocketing. Most people can't afford it, and even the prices of basic groceries are through the roof here compared to everywhere else. But now there's a new problem threatening the existence of our city in a way that it's never been threatened before. And critics say the recent problems we're having with guns and gangs could change how many people feel about trying to stay here.
So we know that crime is a problem in many different parts of the city. We've got crime in our stores, we've got crime on our streets, we've got crime in our subways, we've even got crime in Central Park. But the one place where we've got crime that we never really had it before is inside the very shelters that are supposed to be helping people get back on their feet. Shelters like the Row Hotel, a former luxury hotel right here in Midtown that now houses asylum seekers. But it's not the asylum seekers who this shelter was created for that are the problem. No, it's the people that have snuck into facilities like this and are now sneaking weapons inside of them that have an ulterior motive, which is not the pursuit of the American dream in any way.
The NYPD says Tren de Aragua has been making it over the border with the migrant influx and is getting established in New York.
What we do see is they are trying to grow.
The gang has gone from petty crimes like shoplifting and stealing cell phones.
So this violent gang from Venezuela, they've been active in the United States for over a year, and they're trying to grow their numbers. And one way they go about doing that is by recruiting new members. And many say, after they get arrested and apprehended, that the shelter system here provides a fertile recruitment ground for them. And that's because you have many people that are living in these shelters right now that were misled as to what their expectation should be. Many people were told that when they moved in, their best days were ahead of them, but now you've got mass unemployment. You have people that haven't really been able to get ahead at all and are just kind of stuck after coming here from very far away in many cases and spending thousands of dollars to do it, who are disillusioned. Is that everybody? Absolutely not, but it is a small minority of people. But if there's one thing that could really change parts of the city in ways nobody expects, it's having a shelter system that doesn't help people, but instead sets them up for failure or possibly becoming part of New York City's criminal underworld. And look at this, just down the street from where you have this shelter, you have neighborhoods, you have a residential place full of apartments, and what looks like a crowded sidewalk full of mopeds. Now look, a bunch of mopeds on the side of the street, that's not indicative of crime. Mopeds are useful tools, but what is indicative of crime are the number of people getting caught with guns while being arrested for participating in crime. And it's a real possibility that in the future, if New York, a sanctuary city that does not share anyone's immigration status with the federal government, who could be looking for people it thinks are violent, if the city doesn't do something about its gun violence problem, you may have a situation where gang members decide to continue coming here because they are protected legally in some sense, and because they can meet other people who may want to join them because they don't see any consequences for riding around on a moped with a weapon that you're not supposed to have. No, that could be a real problem in the near future, and that could make people leave. But violent gang members committing snatch and grab robberies on mopeds are not the only people threatening the safety of others on the street.
Monday morning, some aspiring Columbia University students and local residents were turned away from the Morningside Heights campus. In a message Friday, the university's chief operating officer, Cass Holloway, said until further notice, guests must pre-register and access is restricted to 5 entry points.
So remember the campus protests that erupted towards the end of last year? Well, those haven't really ended, and schools are about to reopen, and there's fear that that could once again become a bigger issue in New York once you have a critical mass of university students back in the city. Now, although these protests erupted in the wake of what many people consider to be a humanitarian crisis taking place in Palestine, the problem is they do not always remain peaceful, and many times they spill out of wherever they start into our streets and into our parks and result in lots of property damage. Protests and societal unrest are other factors the former governor mentioned that might cause people to decide New York is no longer right for them. Now, as everybody knows, political, social unrest, that has been normalized to an extent here in New York for at least the last 4, maybe even 5 years at this point. And massive riots full of people who cause destruction all over the place are not anything new. And even if this doesn't cause people to physically leave the city, it will cause some businesses to leave when they get shut down because of looting and break-ins.
The NYPD is looking for these suspects who allegedly splattered red paint onto his Brooklyn Heights apartment building, along with leaving live bugs in the lobby and flyers warning him not to expel students who participated in the takeover of Hamilton.
So the chief operating officer at Columbia University, his personal apartment was recently vandalized by protesters. And if protests are hitting the homes and apartments of school officials outside of the school year, you've got to ask yourself what's going to happen when all of those students return to campus and the school year restarts. Not only at Columbia, but at other campuses throughout the the city. This makes it look like colleges and universities will continue to be flashpoints for societal upheaval in some manner, even though everyone's hoping that the conflict in the Middle East ends as soon as possible. But the real issues that we're dealing here aren't the fault of the asylum crisis, or even the protesters themselves who want to express their opinion. The real issue facing New Yorkers that could cause people to leave would be a total collapse in public safety, because we do not have enough police to deal with mass societal unrest and all of the other crime waves currently taking place. Well, what I mean by that is we have enough police to maintain the current policing status quo, which is reactionary. We have a crime wave somewhere, the police show up, they get rid of it, but now they're gone, and now there's enough time for whoever was causing that crime wave or whatever was causing it to come back, kind of like the street vendor problem that we have. For example, look at all the police